afternoon. Until the presentation is there on the screen, I will just give an introduction why on earth I did this research. When my grandmother died, I'm from a village called Rajagiriya. It was a village those days. And we had a funeral ceremony. The corpse was kept for one day because that was her wish. But still for all, the cultural aspect of the whole issue, there was 7 days the house was open, people were bringing food. I was a kid, like 11 years, and it was such a good thing to look forward to for a child, how nice to have a funeral type of scenario. And I didn't quite realize the therapeutic aspect of this. And I'm a Catholic, so there are all these priests come and they do the vigils and all the rest of it, which was also quite interesting. A lot of food because they're danas and so on. Lo and behold, I commenced as a senior lecturer in psychiatry at University of Peradeniya, and my beloved mother-in-law was with us, and she passed away. And at that time when she was passing away, I knew she was to die. I was in my ward round. I just could come to just say goodbye to her, and I went back to the ward round because there was the only psychiatrist available at that time in the hospital. I couldn't come. And then, after she died, the Barney Raymonds, the undertakers came to Hantana where I live, took the corpse, and it was kept in a parlor for one day, and it was cremated the next day. It was a Sunday. We went to church, and lo and behold, we went home. And next Monday I started working again, and there was thinking that nothing had happened. With this background, I started thinking about what are we doing in the name of urbanization and so-called development and civilization. So, ladies and gentlemen, I started thinking how whether we are missing something or whether we are deleting something which was good in our culture, that we are just going into this global village, excluding all our practices of the village and calling them primitive. So with this background only, I did this research. So to see whether the expression of grief in different cultures had some grief therapy. These are the authors of this paper, me and my colleague, and I received the ethical clearance from the Faculty of Medicine, University of Peradeniya. The funeral is an event in which people express grief and sorrow, as I just mentioned to you. Mari Parks has described the normal grieving process using a 5-stage model which comprises of denial, numbness, sadness, recovery, and reorganization. There are many cultural processes which facilitate this grief in Sri Lankan, among Sri Lankan Buddhist and Muslim communities, and my objective of the study was to describe the rituals, beliefs, and activities where people engage when death occurs in a rural community, and to study how well these cultural practices fit with the 5-stage model, if it's so. This is a descriptive, cross-sectional, qualitative study. The data I collected using semi-structured interview method from focus groups of the representative sample, both communities of Muslim and single Buddhist. I collected the data till the saturation of themes, and I used the grounded theory in analyzing the part of the data. The data was collected in the Galen Bindunawa of the north central province of the country. This is a rural village, mainly depending on scarce source of income, and these are the less access to technology. So I had 9 focus groups with 10 to 15 members with 45 to 60 minutes, and I got informed consent to record this data for my data analysis. Results. Description of rituals and parallels between the 5-stage models are described, which I'm going to do now. And there are some rituals seems to be therapeutic for many stages of grief. So I mean, just a preempt of my results. and I'm going to present you all both results together. For this is a very crowded slide, but I just have to mention. So the first is denial. How does denial is addressed in a Sinhala Buddhist community? Now, of course, if you deny something, you have to make sure the rituals are there to accept it. Now, for example, washing and cleaning the house, removing photographs, informing neighbors, wearing white gowns, all these things. I mean, there's a list of things which actually help you to accept the way I see the data. And also, especially in the Muslim community, which the denial is really addressed well, the corpse is kept at home, they wash, they do periodic cleaning. So many things which actually I believe is address the psychological state of denial, because it's just there, it's not talking to you. Numbness. Now, it is emotional numbness which Mary Parks talks about, which I felt that certain rituals which I've just listed there would address. Of course, this is an approximation of the way I feel. I mean, and also several stages could address by these rituals. Sadness. Of course, having your loved one parting is sad. So the crying is actually given a place. I mean, there were actually, it's not in this study. There are other places they even hire people to cry, but that's not in this study. But crying, mourning, spending nights without sleeping in the Buddhist community and in the Muslim community, although they limit the mourning for 3 days, still there is amount of sadness that they express within the culture. In the recovery phase, the Buddhist community have a lot of alms givings, the Pansukula, and Buddhist bhikkhus come and they do merit for the soul. And also in the Muslim faith, that there are the religious ceremonies, especially the worship, and the body is if a person has debts, someone accepts the debt, or people say, okay, I forgive, that it's not there, because they have this belief that the day of the burial that an angel would come and select the person either way. So reorganization, I believe, in which is a part of the 5-stage of the theory. In the Sinhala Buddhists use the house washing, cleaning, turmeric after funeral, giving financial assistance to the family, and also in the Muslim community there are certain customs, as I listed, which actually help the process of reorganizing. In discussing my data, of course, the 5-stage theory gives a framework of which happens consecutively and which ought to be addressed in grief therapy. There are definitely in Buddhist and Muslim communities certain practices which actually counteract these stages, which we do for adjustment disorder in a clinical setting, which are actually happening within the community with the informal therapists. The Muslim practice ritual, I believe, is the state of denial is really addressed by them, because they do not transfer the corpse out. It's there, they wash, they clean, they keep on attending to the body, so which makes you realize, okay, my dada was there, he's not talking to me anymore, so it really makes you accept. Of course, the Buddhist community also have some amount of this, because the body is brought home and the corpse are in an open coffin. During the state of numbness, the bereaved person will have a state of emotional numbness, which could be seen as an adaptive mechanism towards the acute stress, which is also beneficial which is also addressed by the certain aspects. Sadness is addressed very well in both communities, little less in the Muslim community because they have a restriction. And there are cultural themes for recovery, especially in the longitudinal aspects of the danas, pinkams, and all the meritorious acts that the Buddhist community engaged in is actually very, very beneficial in the stage of recovery. In contrast, Muslim community by definition mourns is restricted, but still there is informal gatherings and helping. So in conclusion, rituals which Buddhist and Muslim communities engaged at a funeral has elements of therapy, and there are some parallels with the 5-stage model of grief described by Mary Parkers. My recommendation from my study is the urban migration has destabilized the cultural fabric which consisted of inbuilt therapeutic strands. A culturally sensitive therapy need to address these inbuilt structures to be efficient in grief therapy rather than having strict theoretical models in therapy. Because I believe we are in a cultural transition, and this address of bereavement have to be addressed by psychologists, perhaps by psychiatrists as well. And in keeping with the cultural aspect and try to reorganize the cultural stance will be much more acceptable, and it will be more therapeutic, and also it will be cost effective because these structures are still there. It's just how we get them back and organize. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have 2 or 3 minutes for some questions.
If he has acquired previously, because of that, he might have been on his own way, can reduce his stress or grief. If he has a spiritual base, religious base, and certain personality factor which are acquired, basically, he is going to be reduced his grief or whatever, I think so. And what you did about this, have you controlled all these? We have to control certain factors when we are experimenting.
My objective of the study was to explore the cultural rituals which could be therapeutic. It was not a therapy about personality traits and its effect on therapy. So I think my study limits there.
Okay, we have another question at the back there.
So I come from India, and
Hello.
in certain cultures that I've seen there, women are not involved in certain rituals, yeah, and it has its own limitations and facilitative, qualities to take them through the grieving process. So I just wanted to know about your observation with respect to any gender-based differences in the practice of these rituals.
Thank you very much. I deliberately did not mention that because, you asked it. The Muslim community has restrictions for women involvement in the bereavement and the ceremonies. I believe that is little, that if they were involved, it would be much more beneficial for the grieving party. But on the other hand, I should not be judgmental about other people's cultures, especially I'm not a Muslim. I think they may be having rationalization within that framework of thinking. So it's very difficult when we may pass judgments over other people's cultures because we might not really understand. It's called cultural misunderstanding, and idioms of culture and the distress is actually unique. So if I were to look from a human rights perspective and a rights perspective of gender, perhaps what you're saying is true, but whether that really affect the outcome, I haven't studied.